the person themselves. We earn our property as we move through life. These things are ours, and it's one of our basic rights and foundations as United States citizens. And the cops shouldn't be able to just come in and take our stuff for a low standard where it's,
I don't
get
think
your conviction.
I don't
Bring
think
your
they're
best
going
case
to.
forward, get your conviction, and then you can take their property after your conviction.
Yeah. They're going to pass this bill. They're going to pass it.
Too. The bill, at the end of the day, everyone has supported it, but isn't it true that it is merely a Band-Aid on a bleeding artery?
It is, but it's a step in the right direction.
And it's such a political no-brainer.
Right.
Everybody wins, and the cops don't even lose. They're really so stupid for opposing this, it's not even funny. They only actually lose like 10% of their revenues, and they miss out on 95% of the cases. And they only lose 10% of the revenue.
Yeah, well.
The resounding fact that I think cannot be overlooked is that, and it's an unfortunate one, that the motivation, which is clearly in the heart of the police officers, is partially driven by need. That they are been unable to finance themselves from a law enforcement perspective, and some of this money actually provides for the needed resources to police.
And my other leads me to my other big point on this. As a student of public administration, and I said this to one of the representatives that we met with in meetings prior to the hearings, I said no self-respecting public administrator that has schooling in public budgeting and has practiced proper public budgeting would rely on these inconsistent funds as part of their normal operating budget. It's ridiculous that they would even think that, and they do. They start counting it in as the normal part of their budget, and that's wrong. They shouldn't. It's goes against all philosophies of proper public budgeting, and no self-respecting public administrator should tolerate that, and the legislature shouldn't tolerate it coming from any public administrators doing budgets.
Yeah,
you know that because why, Steve Miller? How do you know about public health?
Public budgeting? I have a master's degree in public administration.
That's right.
The other problem is it gives the police the financial motivation to go after patients and caregivers. It's like almost like a contingent fee of an arrest. And they shouldn't have that motivation. If there is any forfeiture money, it should go into the general fund.
Do you realize that the motivation that the property that is in the realm of subject to forfeiture only becomes that category of property if the officer likewise makes the determination that there's no immunity? And there's no other areas of the law that the police officer is given the sole responsibility to do that, and resoundingly, when given this decision, is clearly motivated by, or the outcome of that decision is a economic windfall, right? Because if they make the finding that there's the dead plant we're counting as 13, it's outside the room, bam, we're taking everything. That 20 pounds over there of processed marijuana. If I hear that one more time, I can't even tell you the charade that's taking place and the answers that are given on the witness stand by police officers these days that I've never read the law. I can't tell you what usable marijuana is. So you're telling me that my client is relying on this law that was enacted as a protection, and you don't even have the courage to read it? And because of that, you chose to take property that you're going to benefit from? Something's not right.
It's also not right that they're making the immunity determination, because that should normally be the judge who's deciding that. And that's Hartwick and Tuttle always said that immunity was a question of law for the judge to decide.
Well, that's not taking place. That's for prosecution, and that's another point. My point is that there's no other entitlement that's taken away. Your right to property and your right to immunity without some kind of due process, and we're seeing those two things taking place, and when it's taking place, there's financial motivation. All right, we have Andy Levin calling in 5 minutes or less.
No, he's on. He is on the line.
All right, well, I guess we're not going to...
We're cruising tonight.
All right, we're right on time.
We've got
Okay, good.
an action-packed show tonight.
All right, Andy Levin, I guess, is in the queue. We're going to get him on here. He's running for Congress to succeed his father, U.S. Democrat Rep. Senator Levin. He's the Michigan 9th District, encompasses 19 cities, including Royal Oak, Ferndale, Sterling Heights, Warren, and St. Clair Shores. He's a national leader in the workforce training and serves as deputy director and acting director of the Michigan Department of Energy and Labor Economic Growth, and a Michigan's first chief workforce officer. Is he? He's ready, Jim? Yeah. All right. With that being said, please welcome running for Congress, Andy Levin.
Hey, how are you?
Very good, Andy. Thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
All right. Let me start by asking. Although I do see you have some history in government, why would you want to be a politician?
Well, when the person in the White House was elected, that was it for me. I'm these days, for the last 6 years, I've created and been running a statewide clean energy finance market called Lean and Green Michigan, and we're helping business owners and nonprofits all over the state of Michigan retrofit their buildings to reduce their energy use and water use, or to install renewable energy. But for 35 years, the main thing I've done is fight for justice for working people and everybody, human rights, workers' rights, environmental justice, and I just can't take it anymore. I mean, we've got it. It's put up or shut up, and I'm ready to sign up and go to Washington and not just resist Donald Trump and his administration, but actually take a positive message of unifying working people to end 40 years of trickle-down economics and 60 years of divide-and-conquer politics. So let's go. I'm ready.
I understand that. I think a lot of people in the room would agree with you. But tell me this, there's the Democrats have been challenged by exciting the voters. I think some could say that the problem has been that they've been, for whatever reason, the candidate they put forward did not, putting aside the collusion or whatever, there's a mainstreamness to that the Democratic Party's gotten to. Is that a winning strategy, or what is exciting about your platform that people should know about?
Well, there's a couple different things. I don't think it's really about mainstreamness. I mean, I think we need to be both very progressive and very practical. So Donald Trump supposedly tells it like it is. Well, of course, that's nonsense. But the American people are really starving for authenticity, and they want people who are actually going to fight for their interests. And when they look at the Democratic Party in 2016, it didn't look to them like the party of Roosevelt and Truman and Kennedy and Johnson. They felt like it's all bought and paid for by Wall Street and this and that. And I think, the Democratic Party really does need to look in the mirror. And, you can look at President Carter, his time, President Clinton's time, and even President Obama's time, and say that, we've participated in some of this over-deregulation, financialization. So, I don't know how much you want to get into this, but, it was under President Carter that we deregulated trucking, we deregulated airlines, we changed bankruptcy from a black mark on a corporate executive's, career. They would worry about their obituary, to a light rinse they take to shed their obligations to workers and communities. Deregulating airlines means that instead of a middle-class job for someone who throws the bags on and off your Delta flight at Detroit Airport, it's someone making minimum wage, and if those people try to form a union, Delta just ditches that contractor and gets a different one. Workers have no power, no voice in this country anymore, and the American people are aware of it, and you're right. We've got to say it forthrightly, and so,
how important do you think the cannabis issue is going to be in the 2018 election?
Well, I think it's going to vary by state and so forth based on what's going on. But I'm assuming it's going to be on the ballot in Michigan, and it's going to be very important. The war on drugs is a great example of a policy that the Democratic Party needs to get more out in front of. It's been a disaster. I mean, if whatever President Clinton's intentions were, we passed drug laws that put hundreds of thousands of people, mostly people of color, in prison. And I ran the workforce system of this state. We created something called No Worker Left Behind, put 152,000 Michigan workers back to school during the Great Recession. I know how hard it is. Forget about just the jail time of these drug offenses. You're still being penalized when you come out, because it was my job to get you a job in the economy. And it's very hard for somebody who has a felony conviction to be treated fairly and have a shake at getting a decent job. So it's been a disaster for our economy. And, treating marijuana as an illegal drug has created huge black markets, lots of crime. It's cost society a ton. Whereas just regulating it and taxing it would provide a lot of resources for local governments or the state governments, whatever, to invest in our people, in education, in infrastructure, whatever a given state, the voters of a given state sees their priority. So I think it's going to be a big issue, and I think it's a very important issue.
What about expungements for felony convictions for marijuana? Do you think that's something that is good for the workforce or bad for the workforce?
Well, I think if you could figure out a way to structure something like that, it would be good. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could try to mitigate the problem of someone having felony convictions. But if you can create a definition that works and say we're going to expunge people's records who have had minor drug offenses or whatever, it would help them tremendously to get jobs. And that, felony records are a problem beyond drug issues. So it's worth looking at that on its own terms. There's these campaigns to ban the box. I don't know how much you know about these things, where employers just make every person applying for every job, whether they've ever had a felony conviction, and then they'll obviously never look at any of those people. Well, sorry to tell you, if you were convicted for mail fraud and you're trying to get a financial job, I think it's fair for the employer to say, I'm not looking at you. But the broad strokes way they do it is unjust and inappropriate, and it harms people and it harms the economy. So I think we really ought to look at it for marijuana offenses, and there's a lot else we need to do to help returning citizens become productive and contribute to the economy and have a great life. So,
what do you think about asset forfeiture reform? Do you think a criminal conviction should be necessary in order for the police to be able to take someone's stuff?
Well, I think that reform is long overdue. I can't speak to the whole country. These are state laws, right? So they vary. But Michigan's law, they reformed it a little bit, but they didn't go far enough. And the idea, it's the most common sense thing. If you say to an American person, oh yeah, the police can come and take your stuff, and if you never committed a crime and you're found innocent, they can keep it, and they can put you through this incredible rigmarole to get it back. It's just, people wouldn't believe you that happens, but it happens every day. And so I support the reform efforts underway now in Michigan. It's not a federal issue, and I'm running for Congress, but still, hey, it's America, right? We all get to have our opinions. So I think it's HB 4158 that Representative Lucido put forward. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I don't know if there are other bills as well, but I'm aware of that one, and I'm absolutely in favor of some reform in that area. It's long overdue.
Let me ask you this. The recent announcement by the U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions was, there was, I would say, an odd response. The Rohrabacher amendments or riders have prohibited the use of the budget funds for the DEA to intervene in states that